Hello, welcome back to Icewind Dale Enhanced Edition. With me, Elmeron. It has actually been a few days since I last recorded an episode. I took some time to do other things with my life. There were other things had came up. I had to do other things. And it was brought to my attention that I'd been recording. The screen capture had not been capturing the portraits on the side. It should. The two tests I did. It looks like it's now recording those.
Let us not waste time.
I'm wasting time. Sorry. I'll pause. So those should be there. I didn't realize they weren't there somehow. And I even I don't usually. I don't. As you can tell, I don't write scripts for any of this, and I do not do a lot of editing. Mostly, if I cut something out, I know I'm cutting it out, and I just pause the recording so that I don't record that bit, and then start recording again. So mostly, I go back and I check to make sure the audio sounds decent, just to click through the video a few places, and I just wasn't paying attention, and didn't realize. Because the load screens were complete, but it's like black on both sides, so I didn't realize that it wasn't quite wide enough. I think now you're going to be getting the bar at the top because I don't know, the capture area in OBS is just a little bit finicky if I'm just trying to capture the application window instead of a full screen, and trying to capture full screen has its own finicky issues. So I prefer to capture just the application window, but then you have to move it around in the OBS thing to get it to capture. Like, it starts off zoomed way in, and I have to change the resolution and move the window around in the capture box to try to get everything. So anyway, I apologize for not having the portraits. It's not like a huge loss, but you probably didn't see all the times when they were near death or dying. You see all that the little portrait fills up with red and turns gray if they die, and you can kind of see they've got some little status icons that mean things.
Yeah.
But I have to come in here to figure out what they mean because I don't have all of that memorized. They're very small. And it's kind of hard to see what they are, just even to guess. And there's so many effects in this game. So, anyway, with all that said, where were we? We were going to Dragon's something. I had this weird potion of healing. I've got some books that I kind of want to read, but I don't know. You know what? It's the 13th episode. So, welcome back to this game, hopefully properly capturing all of the screen this time, and I'm just going to waste your time reading these books. You can skip ahead, or possibly this whole episode, we'll see. But I'm just curious what they say. History of the Drow. The Descent. We know very little of the Illithiri, or Elves of the South, before this crucial event. Even then, they were known as Dark Elves for the hue of their skins. They dwelt in the jungles and hot forests of the south. A proud, warlike, culturally advanced, some sages of other elven peoples say decadent, folk, the Illithiri attacked all neighbors, including other elven tribes. Their cruel raids and depredations, ordered by warlike nobility and the clergy of their two cruel deities, Gaunadar and Loth, forced humans, elves, dwarves, and others to ally against them. Defeated in a series of titanic magical battles, the Dark Elves fled into underground warrens they had earlier discovered. This event, known as the Descent, marked the end of the Drow as a surface-dwelling race. Dark-skinned folk living in jungles in the south. Slightly uncomfortable. Also interesting parallels the decadent and the decadence and raiding and stuff is kind of an interesting parallel with the Dark Eldar, the Drukari, I think they call them now, in Games Workshop's Warhammer 40,000 setting. Um, they that which I can't remember. I think they would have shown up in the officially in this in a big way in that setting after this game came out. So well after the Drow and Forgotten Realms, but interesting to see the parallels and possible sources that people draw on. The Dark Wars. The warlike Drow nature did not change when they escaped their surface foes during the descent. In fact, they immediately launched a series of wars to establish territories in the Underdark. They began by stealing and seizing dwarven magical items and using them against the dwarves, establishing an enmity that is still strong today. The Drow then fought among themselves, noble against noble, priest against priestess, for rule over their new realm. This all-out war ended amid great magical explosions that brought down the roof of the largest dwarven cavern they had seized, Great Barenden. The ceiling collapsed entirely, burying many Drow in the shattered dwarven cities. The cavern, now open to the sky, became known as the Great Rift. The surviving Drow nobles gathered what people, slaves, and equipment they could seize and fled into the Underdark in search of places to dwell. The scattering brought about the many rival self-interested cities where most Drow live today. Huh. Did I miss one of these? Alright, we're going back. I'm missing number 3. History of the North, number 1. The First Flowering. For millennia, Gold Elves dwelt in Ilefarn, where Waterdeep now stands, and Aerlan, along the River Shining. From their ornate forest cities, they traded with emerging human nations like Netheril and Ilisk, and repulsed the attacks of the goblin races. Meanwhile, dwarven clans united at the nation of Delzone, named for the dwarf who forged the Union. The nation, existing primarily underground, extended from the Ice Mountains to the Nether Mountains. Silvermoon Pass was its western border and the Narrow Sea its eastern shore. Orcs came from north of the spine of the world, but were turned back in great slaughter by the elves. To this day, this is the homeland and stronghold for orcs and similar races. The spine of the world, I assume. Humans immigrated in bands from the Shining Sea and up to the Sword Coast. They became seafarers, striking out across the waves to the Moonshaes, Mintarn, Routham, and the Northern Islands. Elves engaged in an unceasing war against each other, with the humans and orcs taking over the resulting ruins. Perhaps the greatest calamity to befall the fair folk was the Dark Disaster, a killing magic that took the form of a dark burning cloud. It enshrouded the kingdom of... Did they ever think to put a pronunciation guide? Of the kingdom of Mayaratar, and when it faded away some months later, not an elf lived, nor were trees left, only an open blasted moor. The High Moor. High Moor. All was not dark for the elves. Although in retreat as barbarian humans and orc hordes grew in strength, their power rose in the elven court of Evereska, remaining a stronghold to this day. They conceived of cooperation between dwarves, kindly humans, and other elves for mutual survival against orcs, marauding humans, and the tide of beasts, ogres, bugbears, trolls, goblins, gnolls, and other non-human creatures. Led by the rising power of giants. Astonishingly, in at least 3 places, the fallen kingdoms and the cities of Silverymoon and Mythdraenor, they succeeded with shining grace. To the east, on the sandy shores of the calm and shining Narrow Sea, human fishing villages grew into small towns and then joined together as the nation of Netheril. Sages believe the fishing towns were unified by a powerful human wizard who had discovered a book of great magic power that had survived from the days of thunder, a book that legend calls the Nether Scrolls. Under this nameless wizard and those who followed, Netheril rose in power and glory, becoming both the first human land in the north and the most powerful. Some say this discovery marked the birth of human wizardry, since before then, mankind had only shamans and witch doctors. For over 3,000 years, Netheril dominated the north, but even its legendary wizards were unable to stop their final doom, which may be described in Volume 3, which I'm missing. Am I missing it? Did somebody else pick it up? I'm missing it. Shoot. History of the North 4. This era left behind elven strongholds ripe for pillaging by humans and orcs. When elves chose to leave the north and travel to Evermeet, their works quickly disappeared, leaving only places like the Old Road and a ruined port in the High Forest to mark Ireland's passing. And yet it was not only the elves who would disappear from their long-held homes. The human nation of Netheril also stood on the brink of history. Doom for Netheril came in the form of a desert, devouring the narrow sea and spreading to fill its banks with dry dust and blowing sand. Legend states that when the great wizards of Netheril realized their land was lost, they abandoned it and their countrymen, fleeing to all corners of the world and taking the secrets of wizardry with them. More likely, this was a slow migration that began 3,000 years ago and reached its conclusion 1,500 years later. Whatever the truth, wizards no longer dwelled in Netheril. To the north, the once majestic dwarven stronghold of Delzone fell upon hard days. Then the orcs struck. Orcs have always been foes in the north, surging out of their holes every few tens of generations when their normal haunts can no longer support their burgeoning numbers. This time they charged out of their caverns in the spine of the world, poured out of abandoned mines in the Grey Peaks, screamed out of the lost dwarfholds in the Ice Mountains, raged forth from crypt complexes in the Nether Mountains, and stormed upward from the bowels of the High Moon Mountains. Whew, that's a lot of different ways to come above ground. Never before or since has there been such an outpouring of orcs. Delzone crumbled before this onslaught and was driven in upon itself. Netheril, without its wizards, was wiped from the face of history. The Airlan elves alone withstood the onslaught, and with the aid of the Trents of Turlong and other unnamed allies, were able to stave off the final days of their land for yet a few centuries more. Ugh, lot of weird words. In the east, Airlan built the fortress of Askelhorn and turned it over to refugees from Netheril as Netherese followers built the town of Kars in the High Forest. The fleeing Netherese founded Lork and Loudwater. Others wandered the mountains, hills, and moors north and west of the High Forest, becoming ancestors of the Uthgard and founders of Silverymoon, Everlund, and Sundabar. And 5. The adaptable humans made use of magic they could seize or learn from the proud peoples to defeat all enemies, breaking, for a time, the power of giants and orcs. Waterdeep was founded. The last of the pureblood elves died out, a result of continued marriages with humans. That's a sentence. In the far west, men also dwelled, wise, clever primitives called the Ice Hunters. They lived simple lives on the coast since time beyond reckoning, countless generations before Netheril's first founders set foot on the narrow sea's western shore. Yet this peaceful folk fell prey to another invasion from the south. Crude longships that carried a tall, fair-haired, warlike race who displaced the Ice Hunters from their ancestral lands. This race, known as the Northmen, who came from the south, spread farms and villages along the coasts from the banks of the winding water to the gorges of the Mirar. Northman warriors drove the simple ice hunters farther and farther north, forced the goblin kind back into their mountain haunts, and instigated the last council of Illafarn. Within 500 years of the Northmen's arrival, Illafarn was no more. Its residents had migrated to Evermeet. From the coast, Northmen sailed westward, claiming and establishing colonies on the major western islands of Routham and Gundarlun, eventually spreading to all the islands in the Northern Sea. Others migrated northward, past the spine of the mountain, and became the truly savage barbarians of Icewind Dale. In the centuries that follow, Askelhorn became Hellgate Keep, when it fell into the hands of fiends, and Airlan collapsed under the attack of a new orc horde. The elves fled south, joining with Northmen, Netherese descendants, and dwarves to form what would later be known as the Fallen Kingdom. This realm was short-lived and collapsed under the next orcish invasion, though in dying it dealt the goblin races a blow from which they have yet to recover. I feel like I needed a map for all that. I have vague ideas of where Waterdeep and stuff are. I've got the Sword Coast Adventures guide and stuff like that. But
Certainly.
a lot of that really just kind of went over my head. And a lot of that I was like, somebody had to write this. Somebody wrote all that. There were certainly some choices in there. I know a lot of this is... I appreciate the direction they've been going in recent years with your race doesn't define your alignment and stuff like that. I don't know, it always feels a little weird. Alright, and you have some books. History of the North 1 and 2. Which I also have. Okay, so you're not a help. Interesting. You really want History of the Drow, but not History of the Drow 2. And History of the North 1 and 2, which you already have, you'll pay a decent price for. Yeah, so those are the same as the books I just read. Interesting. Alright, well, if we're going to get multiple copies, I'm not going to worry too much about going back for that History of the North Part 3, which feels like a Monty Python movie every time I say it, even though I'm sure it's not. To the Vale of Shadows, to Coldahar Pass. I don't see another exit, so let's just go over to here and see if our new location is just on the map. I have considered trying to cut out the parts where they're just walking across the map like this. I don't know, I might be too lazy. The trouble is, OBS has a thing up in my menu bar at the very top of the screen that's hopefully not being recorded, where I can tell it to start and stop, but it doesn't have the pause option up there. And if I stop it, it saves the video, and then I have to splice them together using another program. Wow, 72 hours away. So, I haven't been doing that. You know what? Let's just call this a lore and getting the screen right and talking about how the recording process goes for me. We'll call it that. We'll call this a video. Next time, and that way, you can skip this one entirely if you don't care about any of this. It's probably a shorter video, but and then next time, we're going to go to Dragon's Eye and actually get on with the plot. So, thanks for watching. If you made it all this way, I appreciate it, and I will talk to you next time. Bye for now.